Okay, this is one of the Buffalo audios. I already located the Portland audios and the Olympia audios that are going into lawsuit in foreign courts. And this is one of the Buffalo ones. This is the first meeting between Stephanie, Jean, Jason, Lisa, and Mike were already gone. They came back though to the room. Tony's there. And there is also FBI agents there. This took place on River Road. Okay. Karen Davis, Jaden, and Jason Nugent went to SUNY together. That's State University of New York. And it's in Buffalo. Jaden, Jason, and Karen were organ harvesting to get through college. Stephanie gave blowjobs and $20,000 to FBI agents
today, Grandma.
and put me under investigation. I'm sorry. Okay, thank you.
No, go ahead. I just say hi.
Jason and Jane admitted to the murder of the police officer Patty Peretti. Jason and Jane were planning or did murder and the murder of a police officer on Best Street. They were actually planning this. Jason and Jane were planning on leaving bombs. Jason and Jane have been raping Aubrey, that's my niece, and she was a newborn at the time. Pointed a gun at my brother John in his face. Threatened my mother and her husband. Jane and Jason was going to set up a meeting between Karen and Anthony. Clark paid off by Jason and Jane, that was a police officer, Buffalo police officer. Judge and Hofferman by John. These are also police officers. It's all on audio. This is one that's very important because this is what set everything. Jason and Jane found out about 9/11 and that I figured out viruses from the police department. And this from Clark tells you that they already knew before all this shit happened. So Jason and Jane admitted to using trauma-based programming. Jane lost weight by using cocaine and meth. Dan was they called him a useful idiot for his father's a lawyer. There's Jane and Jason. Jane is nasal from the drug use. Jason reprogramming Stephanie for terrorism and to murder me. They're sex slave. There's an incest thing going on between these two. And they were going to use John as a decoy. Lisa and Mike were threatened. Jason and Jaden broke into Stephanie and Joe's house. Jason has the whistle for anxiety. FBI was notified Bob Peretti in a planting of bombs, and that came from Stephanie calling them. They later came over, which you'll see that. Tony brought them to River Road. It was Jason and Jaden. John already knows about Avery. Wants Jason and Jane to stay on me, to stay away from his family. He'll be paying them money to kill me, and that's going to be from Tony. Why I was put in the hospital so I could be killed later on. They could get what I figured out about the viruses. The false arrest was to get the house, and that was what Tony said. My mother doesn't give a shit about the problem, just wants it gone. Tony said, this is a quote, "I can't call the cops, I'm manufacturing drugs." Another quote from him, "When I kill that woman," which she met my mother, I was on the phone with her. "She refuses to stay away from that woman," that would be me. Another quote, "I don't give a fuck, she's causing more problems than she's worth," Tony. "I'm gonna kill that bitch," Tony. He repeated it several times. Tony says we've been paying the wrong police. They've been paying the Buffalo police instead of Tonawanda. There's like a 3-block thing that goes on between Buffalo and Tonawanda where it's shared, but the police are the ones that go to River Road, Tonawanda, not Buffalo. They broke in. Stephanie said that's from when we broke in a room. The door was a complete mess. It was screwed. It was being held together by screws. Jane, Jason, Dan, and Adriana were staying in the basement on River Road. Then Agent Pike shows up at River Road. This comes from the phone call Stephanie made. Tony paid Agent Pike. Agent Pike, that bitch needs to die. Needs to be killed. Excuse me. That's a dark coat, so I just need to really get that right. And then she says, Agent Pike says, we all need to make some money. Agent Pike notified about Jane and Jason planting bombs. When she says, we're here about Debbie. And she says they're talking about set up into being a career maker, just like Arafat Nagy, and trying to get me. And they said, what do you plan on doing about this fucking bitch? That was Tony to the agent. And then she says, nothing until she does something. And then Tony says to Agent, listen, I already arrested Arafat Nagy based on your testimony. Well, that's Pike to Tony. Agent Pike to Tony. Then Tony to Pike, well, when you catch her, it'll be a career maker. And Tony says, well, what do you mean? You can't do anything. Make up some charges or something. Tony also says to Pike, you need to help me here. I helped you with Arafat Nagy. And then Pike says, call me when she does something and I'll pick her up, arrest her, and throw her in prison for the rest of her life. And Tony says, well, you better figure something out though. And Tony offered her $250,000 to have me arrested. Then the mail agent says, now we know where she is. We'll get a pass key from Hal. H-A-L. Hal. That was the guy who was taking care of the place. And Tony says, well, she would be easy to kill, won't she? And the mail agent said, yeah, right through the vent. And then Tony says, well, when could you do it? I can only pay you an additional $250,000. And then Tony says, what the hell are you talking about? I do this all the time with the police. And then Tony said, listen to me, she needs to die. I need to get what she figured out. I'm in a lot of debt here. And the mail agent says, what are you talking about, the Saudis? And he says, yeah, the Saudis and other. And then the mail agent says, well, who are you in debt to? And Tony says, a lot of people. We owe drug companies. We owe a lot of foreign people. The mail agent says, like who? Tony says, a lot of people I don't want to discuss. And Tony says, well, Hillary Clinton is supposed to be taking care of this shit. And the mail agent says, I don't think she'll be taking care of anything anymore. She's got other things to be doing. And Tony says, well, she helped me when I killed that Russian agent. The mail agent says, well, I don't think she'll be helping out anymore. And then Tony says, well, that's not what she said to me. She promised me a free get out of jail card. And the mail agent says, well, that's not going to happen any longer. Tony says, well, I'm going to contact her. I want that fucking bitch killed. And then Tony says, yes, she will, or I'll bend that fucking bitch myself. He was talking about Hillary Clinton. That was Tony. And then Tony says, she screwed a lot of foreign countries out of their money. And Tony says she had a conference here, that'd be in Buffalo, and promised them what she figured out and took their money for her election. Tony also said she was bundling at a drug house too, and that would be my house because he made it into a drug house. And then Tony says, I've lost more fucking money because this bitch is alive than you can shake a stick. And Tony says, I've never given a fuck about that bitch. She's just one of Mary's bastard children. And Tony says, I'll find somebody else to kill her. And then Tony says, listen, I'll give you 10%. And the agent said, this isn't the first time we heard this shit. It's on the stuff she turned over to us. And then I actually caught them, the FBI, selling the stuff to Tony. And Tony says, here's the $120,000. And then the mail agent says 2 recorders and 3 phones. And the mail agent says, I don't want to ever hear from your damn asses again. And Tony says, what's going to happen to her? The mail agent said, sorry, only one thing at a time. And the mail agent says, we're gonna kill that bitch real good. And like I said, this is going to foreign and international courts. And there was a sign down on the first floor about the troll had to contact Hal, and Dan is the troll. And that Dan was going to pretend to be my brother John, and Tony told Stephanie, you want your drugs, you're going to do what you're told to do, you little witch. And then Stephanie says, where is he getting all these chips and sensors and stuff? And her husband said, from the terrorism unit. And then Joe says he's been doing organ harvesting for a very long time. And Jaden came in and said the government gets a piece of the pie. And got told that the government found a double for me already. Then the government and her family killed the baby. That was the forced abortion while I was drugged, and they did an abortion on me. And here's what it is. Listen, Clinton and some other people, I don't know, that was by Dan. And then Dan says, I was there.
You have a good day.
And then Tony wanted to get his out of jail card, so he contacted the Clintons. And then Satan is repeated several times. And then she's Catholic. And then Dan says, oh well, I won't mind killing a bitch so much. And then it said her whole family except for her practices Satanism. And then Jaden says, oh, there you are, Karen. And Karen says, I'm here to program her for terrorism. And who's paying Karen? The FBI. I'm here to set things in motion to destroy that damn thing. That's what I figured out with the virus is. And then Karen says, I'm really a man. So I guess Chicago was really right about her. She says she's going back to Haiti. She also says, Karen says, can't do a damn thing for the New World Order with this thing in play. Stephanie says, they took the placenta. They were talking about whether the uterus was removed at the time. And they said, Stephanie says, no, they took the placenta. And Karen says, how do you know that? Stephanie says, I was there. And Stephanie says, we went and used a horse tranquilizer on her. And Karen says, that's why I'm hired by the Liberal Democrats. And Stephanie says, hey, I'm owed a lot of money. And she says, by who? Hillary Clinton, she replies. And then Dan says, here are pictures and videos of her being raped and sodomized. And Dan says around 100. This audio is about 700 long, 700 minutes. Dan says Hillary Clinton wanted them. So it's going to be broken down into 100 minutes each section because there's so much going on and so much information on this. So that's the first 100.